In the rugged, rocky landscape of what is now known as Vasquez Rocks, one of California's most notorious outlaws, Tiburcio Vasquez evaded capture. These canyons and rock formations were once home to a man who escaped capture for nearly 2 decades, all while building a reputation as both a villain and a folk hero. This is the story of Tiburcio Vasquez. Vasquez was born in Monterey, California in 1835, a time when the land still belonged to Mexico. His family, respected members of the Californio community, lived under the traditions of the Spanish colonial system, where large ranchos dominated the landscape, and life revolved around family, land, and community. The Vasquez family was well off, owning land that had been granted to them in recognition of military service to the Spanish crown. Young Tiburcio grew up in this world, learning the skills of ranching, horsemanship, and marksmanship. But in 1848, everything changed. The Mexican-American War ended, and California became a part of the United States. Along with this came the discovery of gold in the Sierra Nevada mountains, which led to an influx of settlers from the east, eager to claim their piece of the new frontier. This sudden arrival of Americans transformed the region almost overnight. Once the rulers of their land, the Californios found themselves pushed aside. For the Vasquez family, the transition was especially bitter, though Tiburcio's father had served as a soldier and earned his land grant. The changing political landscape left the family struggling to maintain their status. By 1852, at just 17 years old, Vasquez's life took a sharp turn. He fell under the influence of Anastasio Garcia, a notorious bandit and figure of rebellion against the American settlers. Vasquez admired Garcia's defiance, and it wasn't long before the young man found himself embroiled in a violent altercation that would mark the beginning of his outlaw career. In 1854, a night of celebration turned deadly when a Monterey officer was killed during a fight between Garcia and the authorities. Though Vasquez claimed innocence, he fled the scene, knowing that the newly established American law would not look kindly on a California youth involved in a violent crime. From that moment on, Vasquez became an outlaw. As he roamed the hills and valleys of California, Vasquez came to see the law as an instrument of injustice. For many of his crimes, Vasquez would later claim they were acts of retribution, carried out not for personal gain, but to strike back against a system that had betrayed his people. Yet, while Vasquez framed himself as a hero for the Mexican-American community, others saw him differently. To the American authorities, he was a dangerous criminal, a man who needed to be stopped at any cost. As California's population swelled, so too did the tension between the old Mexican families and the new American settlers. And Vasquez found himself at the heart of this conflict. No longer just a rebellious youth, Vasquez was about to embark on a crime spree that would span decades, turning him into one of the most wanted men in the West. By the early 1870s, Tiburcio Vasquez had fully embraced his life as an outlaw. No longer the rebellious youth from Monterey, he now led a band of thieves and criminals, executing daring robberies that terrorized the state of California. Vasquez's trademark crimes involved highway robberies, targeting stagecoaches, stores, and wealthy ranchers across California. His gang would swoop in, guns drawn, binding the hands of their victims and stripping them of their wealth before vanishing into the rugged terrain. The robberies were often meticulously planned, with Vasquez carefully choosing his targets and timing each heist to minimize the risk of capture. Yet, while Vasquez thrived on the thrill of the raid, he was also a man of contradictions. Known for his cruelty in binding victims and stealing their valuables, he was also said to be courteous, sometimes even apologizing to his victims after a robbery. He was particularly famous for his charm, especially around women, who found him handsome and magnetic. While his crimes made him an outlaw, Vasquez's charm and charisma made him a folk hero among many Mexican Americans, who viewed him as a symbol of resistance against Anglo-American domination. He was literate, articulate, and cultured, a man who could woo women with poetry and song while evading lawmen with strategic brilliance. But beneath this exterior was a ruthless criminal whose robberies left many dead or wounded. Vasquez's fame skyrocketed in 1873 when he and his gang carried out one of their most infamous raids, the robbery of Snyder's store in the small town of Tres Pinos. What began as a simple heist quickly turned deadly as gunfire erupted and 3 innocent people were killed. The killings at Tres Pinos shocked the state of California. Newspapers across the state, and even nationwide, splashed Vasquez's name across their front page, calling for justice. Governor Newton Booth, determined to put an end to Vasquez's reign of terror, placed a $1,000 reward on his head, an enormous sum at the time. The bandits' notoriety had now reached every corner of the state, and posses were organized to hunt him down. Despite the growing number of lawmen on his trail, Vasquez was a master of evasion, using the terrain of California to his advantage. He frequently disappeared into the mountains, deserts, and canyons that he knew so well. One of his favorite hideouts was the remote Vasquez Rocks, where the jagged formations offered countless places to hide from pursuing posses. With each successful escape, his legend grew. As the bounties for his capture increased, so too did the pressure on Vasquez and his gang. Vasquez Rocks, with its towering formations and hidden crevices, was one of his favorite places to hide. It offered not only shelter but a strategic vantage point from which he could see his enemies coming long before they saw him. Here among the rocks, Vasquez and his gang would rest between raids, hiding stolen horses, counting their loot, and planning their next move. The rock formations served as watchtowers, allowing them to spot approaching posses from miles away. This wilderness had long been home to the native peoples of the area, but now it was Vasquez's territory, a place where he could disappear into the shadows. His men would steal horses from ranches across the region, and after a quick ride through the mountains, they would bring the animals back to Vasquez Rocks. There, in the seclusion of the canyons, the horses were rebranded, making them untraceable, and later sold off in towns far from where they had been stolen. Vasquez knew every trail, every canyon, and every hidden passage in Southern California. Big Tujunga Canyon, just north of Los Angeles, became a critical route for Vasquez and his men when they needed to escape from one area and head to another. From there, they could travel north towards the Central Valley or east towards the Mojave Desert. The canyons provided natural cover, and Vasquez Rocks was a crossroads, close enough to Los Angeles to strike, but far enough to escape without being caught. Welcome back. I'm at the Vasquez Rocks. If you guys are enjoying the video, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Quick reminder, the Patreon is now live. Link is in the bio below. Check it out. I post exclusive content on there all the time. Extended walkthroughs, some exclusive stories, all types of perks. So if you want to support the channel, please sign up for the Patreon. Thank you. In 1873, as the posses hunted him down, Vasquez launched a series of daring raids across Southern California. He and his gang moved swiftly, robbing stagecoaches, ranches, and small towns. One of their most audacious raids occurred in Kingston, a small town in Fresno County. Vasquez and his men looted every business in the town, stealing $2,500 in cash and jewelry before slipping away into the night. With each new crime, Vasquez's bounty increased. By May 1874, the price on his head had grown to a staggering $8,000 if captured alive, $6,000 if dead, which is equal to about $220,000 alive in today's money. The outlaw's reputation had now reached mythic proportions. But for all his notoriety, Vasquez's downfall was not a result of his crimes. Instead, it was his personal life that would lead to his betrayal. Known as a lover of women, Vasquez's many affairs became a source of gossip and scandal. One of these relationships with a young woman closely connected to his own family would be the key to his undoing. While on the run, Tiburcio Vasquez had a romantic relationship with his own niece, the daughter of his brother, Francisco Vasquez. During one of his stays with Francisco's family near Acton, California, he began a secret affair with the young woman. She became pregnant, which created a scandal within the tight-knit Californio community. This affair outraged her family, particularly Francisco and her mother, who were deeply embarrassed by the illicit relationship. His final days of freedom were fast approaching. At the time of his capture, Vasquez was hiding out at the home of Greek George Caralambo, a former camel driver with the U.S. Army who had settled in Southern California. George had been providing shelter to Vasquez for weeks, allowing him to hide in his adobe house near what is now Melrose Place in Los Angeles. However, it was the scandal of Vasquez's affair with his niece that set off a chain of events leading to his betrayal. The niece's family, particularly the women in her extended family, were appalled by the affair. One of the key figures in this betrayal was Cornelia Lopez, a relative of Vasquez's niece, who was married to Greek George. Cornelia Lopez was instrumental in convincing her husband, Greek George, to betray Vasquez. George, likely motivated by both family pressure and the substantial reward on Vasquez's head, secretly informed the authorities of Vasquez's whereabouts. He rode into Los Angeles and notified Los Angeles County Sheriff William Rowland, hoping to earn a share of the $8,000 reward for capturing Vasquez alive. In the early hours of the morning, the posse moved in. Sheriff Rowland, along with Undersheriff Albert Johnston and Los Angeles City Detective Emil Harris, led the group. To avoid tipping off Vasquez, Rowland stayed behind in Los Angeles, knowing that any sudden movement by him would alert Vasquez's network of spies. Instead, Johnston and Harris quietly approached the adobe, armed and ready. As the posse charged the house, Detective Harris wedged the kitchen door open with his rifle. Vasquez, realizing the trap, sprang from his seat and made a desperate dash for the window. But the law was faster. Shots rang out. Officer Frank Hartley fired his shotgun, striking Vasquez as he tried to escape. Wounded, Vasquez fell to the ground, but quickly scrambled to his feet, determined to reach his horse tied up outside. In a final desperate bid for freedom, Vasquez pushed forward, but his body couldn't keep up. George Beers, a correspondent for the San Francisco Chronicle who had joined the posse, fired a point-blank shot, hitting Vasquez in the shoulder. The notorious outlaw fell once more, blood pouring from his wounds as the lawmen surrounded him. Vasquez was taken back to Los Angeles, where a crowd had gathered eager to catch a glimpse of the infamous bandit. Even in captivity, his charm remained intact. Visitors flocked to his jail cell, including men he had once robbed, like Charles Miles, to whom Vasquez returned a stolen watch with a heartfelt apology. Women brought flowers and gifts, professing their admiration for the charismatic outlaw. Vasquez, ever the showman, posed for photographs and signed autographs from his cell, becoming a local celebrity. But celebrity could not save him from justice. In May 1874, Vasquez was moved to Monterey County to stand trial for the murders committed during the Tres Pinos raid. The trial was swift, and despite his protests that he had never personally killed anyone, the evidence against him was overwhelming. After just 4 days, the jury found Vasquez guilty of murder. On March 19, 1875, Tiburcio Vasquez was hanged in San Jose, California. His final words before the noose tightened around his neck was "Pronto," a final defiant gesture from a man who had lived life on his own terms. Despite rumors of a possible rescue from his supporters, no one came. Vasquez met his fate with the same calm he had shown throughout his life. With the snap of the rope, the life of Tiburcio Vasquez ended. He was 39 years old.